Okay, so Jeffrey Zeig, I have this honor to have a little, maybe short interview with you. First of all, I want to acknowledge you about this opportunity. I also want to have this interview in my community here in Israel. Um, and but first of all, I want you to maybe to describe or to introduce yourself because I don't want to have any mistakes there.
Yes. Well, I met Milton Erickson in 1973
Mhm.
and studied with him from 1973, December, until he died in March 1980. And I established the Erickson Foundation with Dr. Erickson's blessings in 1978. It
Mhm.
was the hub around which the first Erickson Congress, the International Congress on Ericksonian Approaches to Hypnosis and Psychotherapy, was organized.
Mhm.
I'm a clinical psychologist. I have a practice. I have a job as the director of the Milton Erickson Foundation. I write books. I travel and teach. So it's a busy life.
Yes, it seems like that in the media, social media. Uh, but also it's maybe how do I describe it? Maybe because it seems that you're a distinguished student of him, isn't it?
Yes, by my design, by his acquiescence,
Mhm.
Erickson had many distinguished students.
Mhm.
Stephen Gilligan, Stephen Langton, Jay Haley, Kay Thompson, Bob Pearson. He attracted many people who were intelligent, who saw that he was doing something that they wanted to emulate.
Mhm. So maybe I will just ask my first question for you is how was it to be so close to Erickson?
Well, it was life changing. I owe a lot of my professional success to my contact with Erickson.
Mhm.
I owe a lot of my personal happiness to his intervention. So Erickson was an inspiring person. He was a person who faced adversity because he had polio when he was a young man, and he suffered from the residuals of polio, which included pain and limitation. And he transcended the limitations to perfume the atmosphere with joy about being alive. So when I went to Erickson for the first time in 1973, it was because I wanted to learn about hypnosis. And I gave up on that idea very quickly. I just wanted to learn about life. And Erickson was a great mentor for helping me to understand what is really important in life.
Mhm. It sounds fascinating. How can you describe the relationship between of you? Have you been his student, his friend, his what?
Well, Erickson was considerably older than me, and he was established in his career,
Mhm.
and so he was a mentor. I um, got as much time as I could traveling from 1978 until 1979. 1973 to 1978. 1978, I moved to Phoenix to be closer to Erickson. I
Yes.
took a job working at a hospital as a psychologist, but really my intention was to be closer to Erickson.
Mhm.
He had many students, but none of them lived close by in Phoenix. And so I occupied that position and got as much time with him as I possibly could.
Mhm. Sounds fascinating. My next question is, do you think that Erickson was ahead of his time in regard to his genius?
I think he was a genius, and alone puts him ahead of his time. The way that I see Erickson, which is just one of many views, is by making comparisons between what artists do and what Erickson did. Artists are experts at helping people to change their state. Hypnosis is a technology, a communication technology to help people to change their state. people who come for therapy are locked into an ineffective state, being irresponsible, being disconnected, being lazy, and they need help in getting into an effective state. If we understand the techniques that artists use, representation, strategic development, theme and variation in music, we can apply those techniques to improve our delivery of psychotherapy. Erickson was a very well-read individual. He was not expert at art, in my estimation, but he was expert in literature. And he understood, I think, that some of the methods that Thomas Mann would use or that Shakespeare would use were applicable to advancing hypnosis. So, yes, he was ahead of his time in that intuitively he made connections from the world of literature to the world of hypnosis and contributed as one of the stellar figures in the history of hypnosis. You study about hypnosis, you immediately encounter Erickson, and you understand something about his more tailored approach to hypnosis, rather than hypnosis being an outside-in phenomena of giving suggestions into a passive person. It's an interactive phenomena of awakening the person, which is a paradox because we mostly think about hypnosis as putting somebody to sleep, but it's really about waking somebody up to their potential.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that. Next question. From your perspective today, what are the most important principles, strategies for the beginner in Ericksonian hypnotherapy?
Well, beginners need to understand something about induction. And in traditional models of hypnosis, you learn an induction technique, and then you apply this induction technique by rote, by memory, as if you're an actor and you're reading the script, and you hope that the person responds concomitantly to the induction.
Mm-hmm.
If we understand that induction can be modified and tailored to the uniqueness of the individual, we're moving into an Ericksonian direction. Rather than doing something rote, we try to understand the underlying principles. That hypnosis has to do with guiding attention, with increasing the intensity of experience, with dissociative activity, with responding to the meaning of communication, the implications in communication. Hypnosis is a way of building responsiveness. In my estimation, that's the essence of hypnosis, that people respond to tone, tempo, gesture, posture, expression, and they can build a response set in which they can access some of the resources that will help them to be more effective in life.
Interesting. Back into those days, did you knew that, or maybe familiar with the genius of Erickson? Did you try to model him? Did you try to learn maybe more than what is described or wanted to?
Well, there are very few people who I've met who I really consider genius, and I don't put myself in that category at all.
I am.
Erickson's intellectual capacity very much exceeded my capacity, and his knowledge base and his wealth of experience. I was one of the younger students who came to him. I was 26 years old when I met Milton Erickson. I had a master's degree in clinical psychology. I was working toward getting my PhD, but I didn't have it at the time that I met Erickson. And he was somebody who I wanted to learn from. And he served as a model of a mature, expert communicator. So I just wanted to spend as much time around him as I possibly could, and pushed my way into moving to Phoenix so that I could be closer to Erickson and learn more from him. He was very generous with his time. He never really charged me anything for any of the time he spent with me. It was a matter of if you have knowledge, you bequeath it. You don't necessarily charge for it. So Erickson was inspiring in his style and had a way of doing psychotherapy that intrigued me. That psychotherapy is a problem, not a solution. The problem is to get the person out of therapy, living life independent of therapy as quickly as possible.
Beautiful.
So Erickson um, um, interested me in how could I learn to be a better communicator? How could I learn to be a more effective therapist? And I had studied at the time transactional analysis and Gestalt humanistic approaches to psychotherapy, Rogerian approaches to psychotherapy. I had some knowledge of psychoanalytically oriented therapy. But what Erickson was doing was light years beyond anything in the contemporary tradition of psychotherapy, and he was being effective. So I wanted to learn what it was that was essential about Erickson that I could incorporate into my repertoire.
Mm-hmm. In a manner of mind-body communication, do you think that there is a place in that field or attitude of spirituality?
Erickson was not an especially spiritually oriented person.
Mm-hmm.
He was well read. He understood some things in the Bible, but spirituality was not a mainstay for Erickson. And if spirituality is bringing out the best in people, I'm 100% for it. It's not the dogma of institutionalized spirituality, but it's the essence of being a grounded person who is interested in helping others and interested in improving the world a little bit by your presence on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Thank you for that. What is the unasked question about Erickson that you know that he wants us to ask about?
What would Erickson ask about?
No, what is the unasked question about Erickson that you knew that he wants us to know about?
I don't know how to answer that. It's an intelligent question. Erickson was an explorer. He was interested in what he could learn. He was interested in what he could learn about humanity and what he could learn about communication and what he could learn about being the best Milton Erickson in consideration of being confined to a wheelchair and being practically quadriplegic for the last part of his life. His inspiration was wanting to be the best Milton Erickson, which made me want to be the best Jeff Zeig I could possibly be, even though I was an immature life form when I was around Erickson. If I had him at my beck and call in the current day, I would try to understand if there was things that he recognized in the world of art that he imported into psychotherapy by virtue of his understanding of literature. Like in literature, there's the strategic development of a theme. If the play is Romeo and Juliet and it's going to be a tragedy, you begin to know that very early in the script, in the play. And Erickson had a literary sense of building a story in a way that was similar to the way in which a novelist or a playwright would build a story. And this was part of strategic development. And that rather than jumping into a concept, it was building a series of steps that would lead the person to realize the concept rather than just understand it cognitively.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. Next question. As one of the most distinguished students of Erickson, how did you find your personal path in this field?
My personal path, a lot of my personal path has been trying to extract and extol the contributions that Erickson made to the health sciences. So, but I continue to look to art as an inspiration. That what are the things that Monet did? What are the things that Shakespeare did? What are the things that Steven Spielberg did? Because these are people who have created massive amounts of impact on people's understanding of the world and people's appreciation of the story. And the problem in psychotherapy is that people may not realize the capabilities that they have to be able to change their perspective, their relationship pattern, their orientation, their state. And part of our job as mature psychotherapists is to help people to realize the capabilities that they have and enact them into the world. And as I tend to be more eclectic in my approach to psychotherapy, using tools from transactional analysis, Gestalt, psychodynamic approaches, and but Erickson speaks to me most cogently as someone who really understood the human psyche and understood ways of entering into a person's world where they would feel supported and not trespassed.
And in a natural way.
Very natural way. Yeah. And he was a person who was in constant chronic pain from the residuals of polio, but he was laughing all the time. He found everything incredibly amusing and added good humor to circumstance, and had limited energy. He had so much energy for practicing or for teaching students, and used it as intelligently as he could. He was really a brilliant thinker and genius level in his understanding of the world, and so there hasn't been another Milton Erickson that has arisen since I met him in 1973. There's been lots of people who've tried to replicate some of the things that Erickson has done, and that's good and true and wise. But Erickson's come along very infrequently in the world.
Mm-hmm. There are some people that when they hear the metaphors or stories about Erickson, it seems too fake to them, for them. What can you tell about that?
Well, everyone has detractors, and the detractors have an area of critique, and some of those critiques have relevance. But what I saw and experienced in Erickson is that there was nothing that was put on about Erickson, or nothing that was phony about Erickson. He had the capacity of delivering, and so people criticize and have a critique about limitations, but I saw Erickson more in the world of possibilities than his limitations.
As much as he look at things from his perspective, I guess.
Yeah, he was a very perceptive individual, and noticed details that escaped me, noticed response patterns that escaped me, noticed nuances in human behavior that escaped me. I had the opportunity to discuss with him a video of a session of psychotherapy. It appears in the first book that I edited, called The Teaching Seminar with Milton Erickson. And we spent about 5 hours going over a 50-minute induction, talking about the intricacies of what he was thinking and what responses he was seeing and what responses he hoped to get. And that was a a watershed moment in my understanding of communication, that somebody would be that thoughtful and that precise about using what the limited capacity that he had, being confined to a wheelchair, but he was alert to things that I wasn't capable of seeing, but could understand once he would point them out.
How do you think that he achieved that precisely communication, if I may say
Yeah,
like that?
yeah. Erickson was a farm boy. He was brought up in a rural community, and with a father who was a farmer but had been a miner, and um, uh, uh, eight eight siblings, and so he was an aberration in his own family, and he was studying and reading at a very early age, and trying to learn more. But his family of origin were salt of the earth Midwestern farm family, and Erickson was an aberration, a unique person within his family. So I can't account for how Erickson developed himself. I'm sure polio was one of the inspiring things. He had a lot of mental strength, mental courage. He
Mhm.
was not going to be defeated by adversity. He was going to be challenged by adversity and do his best to deal with whatever adversity befell him. So he really just wanted. My reaction of being around him was that I wanted to get as much time as I could, and he made me want to be a better Jeff Zeig, and not he wasn't there to fill me with theories and techniques and ideas about psychotherapy. It was more about appreciating my capacities in the process of living.
Do you think that he was living in the presence when you were with him, or he just always look at the future and all the resources that have there?
Well, he was tremendously present. I felt like I was with somebody who was in a kind of Zen state.
Mm.
Um, Erickson lived with a wider understanding of the present moment than I could have, and oriented into the future. A lot of psychotherapy was about analyzing the um, patterns of the past that created the patterns of the present. But Erickson was more in the American Western tradition about being oriented into the present, and life is lived in the present, oriented to the future. And he wasn't so interested in the formative influences that created the patterns that were maladaptive in people's lives.
Okay, thank you for that. The last question, with your permission. What is your personal message to our community here in Israel and in generally to our listeners to this interview?
אני שמח להיות כאן.
First of
Yeah,
all,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's worthwhile to study about psychotherapy and the way in which psychotherapy can provide more joy and more freedom and more possibilities in living. And if you study about psychotherapy, Erickson is one of the most iconic figures in the history of psychotherapy. And there aren't a lot of books for the lay public about Erickson, but there's enough literature out there. A good place to start is Uncommon Therapy by Jay Haley, which is a beautifully written book about some of Erickson's cases, and gives you some perspective on the strategic thinking of Erickson. Erickson was like the people who came and looked at an elephant, and some people saw it as a trunk, and some people saw it as a leg, and So in order to really get a perspective about Erickson, you need to understand some of the people who studied with him, because we all had our own unique lens to understand what Erickson did. And I think that Erickson serves as a model not only of intelligence and creativity, but as a model of how to enjoy life in spite of, because of adversity. That adversity doesn't need to be anything other than a challenge. And adversity is something that can inspire us. So it's about, yes, there's genius in Erickson about communication and about psychotherapy, but more genius about how to live an intelligent life in spite of the adversities that we all face.
Beautiful. Jeffrey Zeig, it's a great honor. I acknowledge that and I appreciate that a lot. Thank you very much for this interview. I wish you all the best.
Me too. I wish you the best, and thank you for the intelligent questions and for reaching out.
Thank you very much for that.